The story of Call of Duty Vanguard's ultimate demise is one of gaming's greatest. It's not common to see a AAA title that's part of one of gaming's most successful franchises to be abandoned and left on the shelf, both by its player base and the developers. Vanguard promised to be a return to form for the series, however it was met with huge disappointment from fans who quickly discovered that the game was plagued with technical issues, greedy monetization practices, a severe lack of touch with the community, and what some would call developer incompetence. For the next little while, we will dive deep into the timeline of failure for Call of Duty Vanguard and uncover the catalyst to its untimely demise.
Serves as an example of the laziness and the creative bankruptcy of the franchise and Activision.
This game feels completely incomplete, and I cannot in good conscience or good faith recommend that anybody spend their money on it.
This game might actually be the worst Call of Duty of all time.
Understanding why and just what went wrong with Call of Duty Vanguard requires a look into the past, to a time before the game was revealed to the public. After all, it's fundamental to finding out what led to this game's inevitable downfall, because rather than a few issues, the game would inherently suffer due to a series of lackluster decisions and unfortunate events that would reveal themselves through the course of the game's life cycle. August 16th, 2021, and the teaser trailer for Vanguard was released. It had long been speculated that the next game in the franchise was going to go back in time to the World War II era. It was the release of this trailer that would confirm what many leakers and theorists would speculate. The reaction to the official tease was as you'd expect. People were not happy, and they made their opinions very known. It's important to note that the public perception was already at an all-time low for Sledgehammer Games. Their previous title released in 2017, being Call of Duty World War II, whilst being more successful than Vanguard and inherently a better final product, it still failed to meet expectations for a large proportion of the Call of Duty player base. Coupled with the drama that we got news of in 2021 surrounding the title that we now know of as Black Ops Cold War, where Sledgehammer was ultimately removed from developing the game due to internal conflict and lack of leadership, would further diminish player expectations for the release of Vanguard. On the topic of expectations, it was the marketing campaign that would both confuse and give further confirmation to the unoptimism fans of the franchise were feeling. The release of both the single player and the multiplayer World War reveal trailers, the complete lack of creative direction and identity for Vanguard would shine through. It ultimately left us with the question, what exactly is Call of Duty Vanguard? A question that 5 in-game seasons later has yet to be answered. After a plethora of marketing and in-game Warzone events, Vanguard will go on to officially release on November the 5th, 2021. Immediately, it became clear that the game was far from ready. Let us start with the worst part about this game, zombies, because it's laughably bad. Even die-hard Call of Duty fans have been vocal in their disappointment with the mode. In fact, many believe that Vanguard Zombies was the worst iteration, and I say the word iteration in quotes because ultimately it's a complete downgrade from anything we have ever seen in this franchise. The Zombies mode has always been a fan favourite. It's fast-paced, challenging, has a unique, compelling storyline, and most importantly, it was fun. A word which meaning was seemingly forgotten when developing Vanguard Zombies. In order to see just how terrible Vanguard Zombies is, let's go back to the roots of zombies, to the foundations that this mode was built on. Call of Duty World at War was the entry point for the mode, the spark that would ultimately ignite the fire for zombies. For a game released in 2008, it really shined at implementing the elements that made it so enjoyable. Interesting and interactable maps and characters with compelling stories, Easter eggs, weapon upgrades, round-based modes where the zombies grew in health and numbers with each wave, giving the sense of impending doom, wall buys, doors to open that allow players to use certain areas of the map to their advantage, power switch to open doors and turn on perk machines, wonder weapons, and the list goes on. These are just some of the aspects that made the game mode so entertaining. But what happens when you take all of that away? When you remove all of the things that made zombies so much fun to begin with? Well, you get Vanguard. Sure, they later added round-based maps, wall buys, Easter eggs, and recycled wonder weapons with the release of Shinonuma for the 1 billionth time, but that all pales in comparison to Call of Duty World at War. In fact, the argument could be made that World at War has an excessive amount of content compared to this game, and it's important to note that World at War was released over 14 years ago. The original Zombies mode in Vanguard has been drastically changed from its previous form. Maps are made up of uninteresting layouts with assets reused from multiplayer, with no substance or atmosphere, frustrating bosses that shoot back at you when they're hit, no dedicated characters, story, nothing. These are a tiny fraction of the issues that plague this game mode. It's hard to see why the developers opted to change something that we all know and love to something so uninspired and boring. The Zombies core formula has always been a source of excitement for people who play this game. The objective-based gameplay that was pushed heavily as being an improvement to Zombies doesn't carry the same sense or thrill in playing like previously seen in other Call of Duty games. The worst part about it? The mode was developed by Treyarch, the same developer that brought us masterpieces like Origins, Mob of the Dead, Shadows of Evil and Revelations. But to go from that to Vanguard is shameful. A huge slap in the face for the entire Zombies community, and goes to show just how out of touch with the community they have become. Abandoned, forgotten and tainted. 3 words that describe the state of multiplayer in Call of Duty Vanguard. Ever since the release of Warzone and its huge success, multiplayer in Call of Duty is no longer the centre of attention for Activision and its development studios. Traditional multiplayer has become somewhat of a sandbox for Warzone, with many players only choosing to play it in order to unlock attachments for the new meta weapons. With multiplayer no longer being the focus point for development and content, Vanguard has suffered horribly, and it shows. There is simply nothing interesting, new or innovative about multiplayer in Vanguard to keep and maintain player interest. It's the same old World War II weapons that we've used in almost every World War II shooter, the same game modes, perks, progression system, and the list goes on. The thing that killed this game for many was the complete lack of inspiration and innovation. The only new change they made was to introduce a game mode known as Patrol, which barely anyone plays and was hardly innovative. Vanguard released with 20 multiplayer maps, which was a huge point of interest for the game's marketing. It had many people excited for the largest collection of multiplayer maps on release seen since the original Modern Warfare 2. And whilst there are a few maps that aren't too bad, I'd argue that 90% of them are some of the worst we have ever seen in a Call of Duty game, all of which has combined into one of the most forgettable and unenjoyable multiplayer experiences to date, and that's of course when the game decides it wants to work. It's common for modern games to ship with a few bugs. After all, they're incredibly big and incredibly complex. Whilst Vanguard is no Cyberpunk 2042 when it comes to being a buggy and unfunctional mess, at least CD Projekt Red are actively fixing issues within their game, something which can barely be said for Sledgehammer. When Vanguard released, the bug list was so large it could fill every single page in the Bible. Whilst that's somewhat of an exaggeration, it's laughably bad for a game developed by one of the largest development studios in the world with the sheer amount of wealth that they have. For one of gaming's most profitable and some of the largest game studios in the world, it's completely unacceptable to have a product that players paid over £60 for, which is around $70 US, whilst continuing to try and squeeze every single possible penny through an overpriced greedy cosmetics and bundles system from the store, when they can't even fix the core of their game. I'd argue that Sledgehammer is the weakest developer for the entire franchise, and I know many people would say the same. Advanced Warfare was the only innovation they brought to the table, Cold World War II was mediocre at best, and Vanguard puts the final nail in the coffin for the reputation of the studio.